Welcome to this talk, Sunday the 24th of September. Now we're going to carry on treading where mainstream media dares not or refuses to tread, looking at excess deaths. And I'm going to be taking data from here today. This is the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. I'm going to be taking data direct from their website. I've put the link there. That's the direct link if you want to check it out. Comparing that with data from our world in data, largely based from Oxford University and the Office for National Statistics in the UK. And unfortunately, these are essentially in agreement with each other. This is a definite phenomenon which is going on. Thousands of people dying, no one talking about it. What's going on? Let's look at the facts and you can judge for yourself. Now, to begin with, this is the data here from the United Kingdom, from the OECD. Now, this is the first week of the year, so that's up to January the 7th, that's up to January the 14th, 21st. So they're the weeks of the year. And these numbers here are the excess deaths, so 3,123 excess deaths, 4,164 excess deaths, 22.5%, 26.4%, 19.8%. And we see this all the way through the year. Deaths being above what we would expect, apart from slightly below on week 10, slightly below on week 14, and slightly below on week 429. But otherwise, all the other weeks where there's data, this is basically up to week 30, which is roughly the end of July, 36,316 excess deaths. It is clear the excess deaths were not limited to 2021, 2022. They are carrying on in 2023. And yet we have this deafening silence about it. So up to about just something like the end of, not quite the end of July, I think, in the UK, 36,316 people died, more than we would expect. Now, if we compare this to some other countries, they haven't done so badly. For example, this is Hungary, so a less sophisticated, some might say, more Eastern European country, maybe less less of some things going on there. This is Hungary here, and we see that week 1, less deaths than we would expect. Week 2, less deaths than we would expect. And we see less deaths than we would expect pretty well all the way through. Some months with more, of course, as you would expect, fluctuation. But basically, they've got minus, that's 3,183 deaths less than we would be expected in Hungary. So good for Hungary. Now, the United States, I'm afraid the position is not good at all for the first 30 weeks of the year from the OECD data. Let's just look at that now. We have it here. So again, week 1, week 2, week 3, all the way down. And we see excess deaths in every week of the year in the United States, with excess percentages on the right. And I'm afraid we don't see one negative week where deaths were less than expected. And for the United States, for the first 30 weeks, that takes us up to 147,000 excess deaths. And remember, this is in 2023. This is current. This is as current data as we have. Now, Poland, again, more Eastern European country. Again, we see a much more varied looking picture with positives and negatives. But overall for the year in Poland, or for the first 30 weeks of 2023, less 456, so 456 deaths less than would be expected. So we're seeing this dramatic difference between Eastern European and Western, more what you might call sophisticated countries. Australia, again, in Australia, no times where the deaths were less than expected. Data there only going up to week 21, but even in that time, basically 10,000 excess deaths in Australia. Canada. Now, the OECD data in Canada is not complete. Our world in data is much more complete, but there's been changes in the way that the Canadians have collected their data lately. So I think we can be fairly sure that this data for the first 21 weeks is accurate. For the first 11 weeks only is accurate. And we see excess deaths all the way through, unfortunately, with these kind of percentages, 9, 8, 6, 3% excess per week. and that comes up to just under 4,000 deaths for Canada. Netherlands, I'm afraid it's not particularly good either, even though Netherlands has got a smaller population, of course. We see excess deaths in every week of the year. I don't see any negatives there at all. Again, percentages in 10-14% sort of level, coming to 9,000 excess deaths in the Netherlands for the first 30 weeks of the year. New Zealand, again, we see excess deaths in every week. This is just pure data. It's pretty well impossible to argue with this. People will, of course, but I'm presenting you the data and you'll just have to look at it for yourself. But if you look at this data for yourself, I'm taking this directly from their spreadsheet. This is not me embellishing this at all in any way, shape or form. So New Zealand coming to 2,804 excess deaths for the first 30 weeks. Sweden, slightly better. They've had less, won't go through all the numbers, but Sweden have actually had less excess deaths. 1,000 less, even for the small population. That's a negative figure, less than they would have expected. Denmark, however, is positive. They've had more excess deaths again, very few negative months in Denmark, leading to 1,895 excess deaths in Denmark for the period of time. Now I'm going to show you some graphics now from the, I think the first ones are from Our World in Data, that are basically consistent with that. Just before we do that, maybe like me, you're getting a bit fed up of being told what to do in order to conform. And we are being subjugated more than I can remember in my lifetime. So here's a picture from a former era that I've known for a long time, but I've just rearranged, just had my interest in it reignited, really. Everyone performing the salute, conformity, doing what they're told, doing what the mainstream narrative orders them to do. Or is it everyone? Well, of course, it's not everyone. There's one man standing tall. Everyone giving the salute apart from one man who refused. Now, all of the people in this picture are dead now, I guess. And this one man, August Landmesser, obviously died for his beliefs. But out of everyone in that picture, men and women, one man there died with dignity, with his head held high, refusing to conform. Quite moving, really. And just before we go on, oh, that's him there, yeah. Almost certainly him. There's some debate about it, but it's almost certainly August Landmesser. He was sentenced to a military penal colony where, of course, he was killed. And let's look at some data anyway. I just, there's just so much pressure on everyone to conform at the moment. I just feel it's worth learning from heroes of the past, perhaps, and having the courage to stand out from that which we are ordered to accept. Anyway, I digress. Now, this is from Our World in Data. So here we see excess mortality, deaths from all causes compared to projection, and we see it's unfortunately just peaked lately. So above the zero line most of the time, and as we've seen, the average is quite a bit higher. Australia, well, sadly, since what? September 2021, and all through 2022, well into 2023, the excess deaths in Australia continue. And my friends and colleagues in Australia tell me that there is no outcry in the mainstream media. It's very, very hard to explain. Outcry in certain circles, but not in the mainstream. We just need to look at this independently, as I'm trying to do now, and ask these questions. Canada, as we've said. Now, Canada, I do hope Canada is better. This is looking much lower, but I am aware that the Canadian data they've changed the way they collect the data in Canada lately. So let's hope this is accurate, and that there is a reduction in excess deaths in Canada, and Canada is different from all the other countries which have behaved in a very similar way. I'm surprised that the Canada numbers are low. I'm delighted if it's true, but let's keep an eye on that, because there are, as we say, there are question marks over the way the Canadian data is currently being collected. It would be disappointing if there's anything going on untoward, of course. Ireland, I'm afraid, excess deaths remain high. Again, basically all the way since early 2021, throughout 2022 and well into 2023. And of course, when Omicron came along, 2022, we expected the excess deaths to go away, but they haven't. And in 2023, we're still in the Omicron era now, and these aren't COVID deaths. The vast majority of these, of course, are not COVID deaths. And yet they carry on. Hungary, again, much, much lower, as we've seen. So Hungary faring much better than our more English-speaking and sophisticated countries. Netherlands, well, yeah, there are excess deaths. They've persisted in Netherlands. It's basically been above the zero line since, well, there was a dip there in beginning of 2022, but it's been up most of the time and remains up somewhat in 2023. New Zealand, again, the average is above the line, unfortunately, again, in New Zealand. Romania, though, it's well below the line, as we've noted. So Romania doing very well in negative territory with less excess deaths than we would expect. So very positive for Romania. United Kingdom graphic is here, again, as we know, above. And the United States is looking like it's going down at last, but we'll see how that data pans out in the States. But certainly for the first 30 weeks for the OECD data, we've seen it's above what we would expect. Now, I'm just going to compare this with the Office for Health Improvement data from the UK briefly. So what we're looking at here is, this is 2022 here. The light coloured lines above the line are more deaths than we would expect. Week per week, we see again it's higher in people aged 0 to 24. So this is not restricted to the elderly. This is all age groups. So in the UK, or at least this is English data, where most of the UK population lives, is higher in the 0 to 24-year-old age group. Quite tragically, actually, a terribly young age group. 25 to 49, again, we see very few weeks with less deaths than would be expected. Primarily, we're seeing many more than would be expected. This is the 50 to 64 age group, and again, well, even worse there, isn't it? Excess deaths in virtually every week. In the 50 to 64-year-old age range, there's 1 week there in early 2022 when it was lower than expected, but apart from that, excess deaths at all ages. Same for the 65 to 74s. Same for the 75 to 84. So I'm afraid we're seeing excess deaths at all ages. It's and even in the very old age range there, we still see excess deaths. So I'm afraid this is what we are seeing. These three data sources agree. I'm just going to end with a similar picture to the August landmass one, really. This is from, we've been looking at David Werner's book, Where There Is No Doctor, lately. And this says, keep learning. Don't let anyone tell you are things that there are things you should not learn or know. So keep learning. Don't let anyone tell you that there's things you shouldn't learn or shouldn't know. We have a right to transparency, especially from our governments, whom we are paying. More on this pretty soon, but that's as far as I'm going to go for today. So for now, thank you, and keep learning, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. We have a right to know, despite the deafening silence around us. Thank you for watching.